My name's Owen Scullion. I'm the brewery manager, or AKA General Dog's Body at Hilden Brewery. So I wear a lot of hats as any small business to keep the wheels turning, keep the beer coming out the door and keep the business going. It's a family business. We're in our 40th year now, and I hesitate to count the years that I've been here. Obviously, I grew up with it in my backyard, but I have been here about 18 years now since I completed my degree. I did a degree in brewing and distilling. Obviously, having grown up with a brewery in my back garden, it was kind of like always there for me. After completing the degree, doing a little bit of work for other breweries, I moved back here and starting into our 40th year's brewery, 18th year for me. So yeah, going back 40 years, it is a long time. Obviously, when you talk about the heritage of brewing, it's hundreds of years, but we are Ireland's oldest independent brewery, started by my parents, which in itself, for me, is pretty crazy. My parents were living in England at the time, lived in the south of England, and just got a taste for real ales, craft beers that were prevalent way back then in England. It was quite common. Not necessarily the small breweries, but they were just starting to kick off. And when we moved back here, my mum had always wanted to have her own business, so she started Hilden Brewery. So we have essentially two products here, hospitality and beer, which kind of go hand in hand really. But key to both those products essentially is our location. Hilden Brewery, it's where we are. It's where you're filming right now in these grounds. If we didn't have this location, conceivably we would have neither elements of our business. So hospitality is obviously an opportunity. Going way back, it was an opportunity for us to put our beer in front of people when we couldn't do it before. And we've grown that over the years to offer coffee shop, restaurant service, beer tasting, brewery tours, functions, events, weddings. We do all of that. Our highlight of the year when it comes to hospitality is our beer festival at Bank Holiday weekend, the end of August. I think our first one was in 1984. Again, just because of the stupid big house my parents decided to buy to put the brewery in when it comes down to it. Got all the space, so let's do a beer festival. And it's always been well received because way back when, people just didn't have something like we were offering. Beer-wise, we started off, as so many small breweries did 40 years ago, in cask ale. It was an authentic, traditional, full-flavoured beer that certainly wasn't available here at the time. And we've evolved with the times, as we've been influenced by international flavours, as the States has led a way in terms of what contemporary craft beer is. We've evolved with that as well. So we still like to feel we have a foot in both camps. We still do cask ale, and we still, we've evolved to hop forward pale ales and IPAs and saisons, and every good beer style that there is out there, we'd like to take a hand to it. So what I love about the job, it's hard to answer it succinctly. I think it's as you'd hope. First of all, location. There's so many elements to do what we do. Crafting the beer, making the brewery run, looking after our facilities we have here, reinventing ourselves. I've grown with the job, and every time you introduce a new process or service, the learning curve's fairly steep. And that's, I think, what I like, is the constant evolution of the business and what we do, what we can introduce to improve things and make things run better, be more efficient, get more flavour in a beer. Yeah, just how we keep evolving is what I enjoy, essentially is what it comes down to. take you down to Owen now, and he can run you through what our brew day is like and show you a brewery and what we do here to make our beer.
Hi, my name is Owen and welcome to Hilden Brewery. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you through the brewing process today. So the brewing process starts with the barley, the malted barley. It's an important part of the process. So how this comes to us, this arrives to us uncrushed. We end up having to mill it ourselves. The process of getting the barley itself in this state, there's a number of steps. So it goes to a maltster. The maltster then puts it through a series of steps. The initial step is placing it in water, so steeping the grain, and that activates the germination of the seedlet. And once that's grown to a certain degree, it is then keeled, which is cooking the grain, and you get a lightly roasted malt. Longer keeling processes result in darker malts like roasted barley, etc. So the malt goes in this initial hopper here, and then it travels through these conveyor belts where it's collected in this hopper. And then after a short period of time, we release the grain and it travels down into the mill itself. So the mill itself has two rollers, and we can adjust the fineness or the coarseness of the grain. If the grain is too fine, then you end up with flour, which is not ideal because it'll just clump together and the water won't flow. If it's too coarse, then the water will flow too freely and you'll just end up with water and a mess. After it's been milled, it travels down here and goes into another hopper. And the following day, when we're actually brewing and mashing in, we turn on this auger, which brings the grain into the next room for mashing. The reason that we mill is to get access to the enzymes and the sugars that are within the grain itself. And to get access to those, you need to add water, and that is the next step, which is mashing, and that's over here. So the mixture of grain and water sits in here from anywhere between an hour and a half or 30 minutes, depending on the temperature. After that time has elapsed, the liquid, which is called wort, travels through here and goes into the kettle for boiling. What's left over is spent grain, and this spent grain is then transferred off to local farmers. So here we have the kettle, and this is where the wort goes after it's sat in the mash tun for an hour and a half. Here we get the wort up to the boil, so it's 100 degrees Celsius, and we add in our hops for bittering. This step results in the alpha acids that are present in the hop cone being converted into iso-alpha acids, which contribute to the bitterness of the beer. There's a number of different steps besides just the bittering addition. There's also an aroma addition and a flavor addition, which are done at 15 to 5 minutes remaining in the total boil time. Boil time can vary between breweries. Some breweries will do 30-minute boils, some will do 60, and others will do 90-minute boils. We here do a 60-minute boil because we find that works most effectively for us. The boiling step also sterilizes the wort, so there's no foreign characters floating around in the wort, so there's no wild yeast, no bacteria. They're all killed off by the boiling process. Once the boil is done, it transfers into the next vessel, which is called a hop back. Not all breweries have a hop back. A lot of breweries will have whirlpools and other systems. Okay, so here we have the hop back. So this is where the wort, once it's been boiled, is transferred, so it travels down through a pipe. At this stage, what we want to do is drop the temperature a small bit and then add some aroma hops. The hops that go in at this stage often come in 2 to 3 different forms. We've got the hop cone, which is the flour, or we've got hop pellets, which is a more concentrated version. And we also use, on occasion, oils, which is an even more concentrated version. When you're adding the hops in here, you would say need 5 kg of the leaf, maybe 1 kg of the pellets, and even less, maybe 100 ml of the oil. So the oil really saves an awful lot on the cost of the flour and the pellets. So once the hops have been in the hop back for about 30 minutes, the wort is then transferred into these fermenters, and the wort passes through a plate heat exchanger, which brings the temperature down to about 20 degrees Celsius, which is the ideal temperature for yeast to ferment at. At Hilden, we use a number of different types of yeast, but most of the yeast that we get comes in this dry format. And after fermentation, you end up with this wet yeast. And this wet yeast can then be cropped from the bottom of the FV and then transferred into another FV. So you can effectively have serial fermentations taking place. So after the initial fermentation is complete, you crop off the yeast, and then if you have another beer coming through, you can add that yeast into the next one as well. Or if you want a different species of yeast, you can also just get different varieties of those dried yeasts. The fermentation process can take anywhere from 5 days to a week. Often it's longer when you're using dried yeast. When the yeast has gone through a fermentation, it's adapted to the wort environment, and so is more keen and ready to start active fermentation. So you can actually bring down the fermentation time from a week to 4 to 5 days. We've taken the yeast from the fermenter. It's then centrifuged or filtered and transferred then into a can or a bottle, which is the next stage of the process. But that's pretty much it here for the brewing side of the process.